program. But we begin on the gridiron where Geno Smith, at 35 years old, is looking for a new home. The Las Vegas Raiders cutting him loose after, of course, remember, the trade from Seattle to Vegas, signing a 2-year, $75 million extension to play for his old pal, Pete Carroll, who he was with in Seattle. Both of them are on the outs now. Smith released the Raiders opening up $8 million in salary cap space while taking on $18.5 million in dead money, as you can see in that tweet from Adam Schefter. There are more and more reports looming and surrounding this story. Among them, the Raiders, may be in the quarterback market beyond the obvious of, hey, they've got the number 1 overall pick off a 2-13 campaign for Geno Smith personally, where he led the NFL in interceptions. It was really just a dumpster fire of a season, unfortunately, in year 1 and the only year with the Raiders for Geno. So everyone has assumed with that number 1 overall pick, the Raiders will go out, draft the reigning champion, reigning Heisman winner, Fernando Mendoza, out of Indiana. And I'd say that's a pretty safe assumption as things go right now. But the interesting report out of Diana Rossini from The Athletic earlier today is that the Raiders, again, could still be in the QB market, as they may not want to start Mendoza, the, again, perceived number 1 overall pick, right away, even if they take him. So they would still be looking for a quarterback in free agency to be something of a bridge QB, as you don't see oftentimes these days with number 1s. For instance, Cam Ward started out of the gate last year as a member of the Tennessee Titans, but Drake May, who was the 3rd overall pick in the draft the year prior by the Patriots, he didn't start until a decent chunk of the way into the year. It was Jacoby Brissett, the current Cardinal, who was the Week 1 starter. So not unprecedented, obviously, among top 3, top 5 picks, let alone number 1. Let's go over to the world surrounding Kalshi. We had been talking of late about the death of Ali Khamenei, of course, the supreme leader of Iran. Kalshi is facing backlash after refusing to pay out $54 million in bets tied to his fate. Kalshi says the rules do not allow markets that directly profit from someone's death. Kalshi, they closed the market, of course, at the last trading price instead of paying full winnings and refunded some fees. Kalshi treated the market like an invalid market, which has really rubbed many the right way, particularly those who stood to profit. When reports emerged that he had died, many trading holders holding yes shares believed that they had won a large payout. Kalshi froze the market, however, and voided the payouts. So having to deal with some of the backlash as it relates to that right now. I will remind people how sick and twisted all of this is, because again, we are talking about the death of somebody and people wagering on it in the prediction market. But again, that's where we are in the space right now. Going over to the NCAA and back to football. The NCAA is heeding the Supreme Court's ruling over Trinidad Chambliss, the preliminary injunction that is being appealed by the NCAA because it granted him eligibility for the upcoming 2026 season. In a nearly 700-page filing to the Mississippi State Supreme Court today, the NCAA is asking the court to overrule the injunction and expedite the ruling. Going over to the Diamond, of course, baseball spring training is underway, but so is the World Baseball Classic, and Shohei Ohtani, who is just an absolute force of nature, the greatest baseball player these eyes have ever seen, and probably in the history of the sport, went off for Team Japan against Chinese Taipei this morning early on. 13-1 in only 7 innings. Ohtani, 3 for 4, a grand slam, 7 total bases, 5 RBI, only missed the cycle by the triple. Japan 10 runs in the first and third runs in the first and third, pardon me. And just, again, you have to consider Japan, as stacked as that United States roster is, and some of the other teams, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, some of the obvious ones to think about. Japan, do not count out this squad when you have Shohei Ohtani doing what he is doing on what feels like a daily basis. Now, basketball, huge news in the NBA as Jayson Tatum, the superstar of the Boston Celtics, the return is looming. He is officially questionable to play tonight. First time he has had the Q tag all season long after rupturing his Achilles in a playoff series loss to the New York Knicks last May. Of course, has not played since. It's been 10 months. Shams Charania, ESPN, tweeted yesterday that the return could happen tonight against the Dallas Mavericks as Cooper Flagg makes something of a homecoming. Of course, the Maine native has never played at the TD Garden in Boston. Will have loads of family and friends in attendance, but Tatum right there to steal the spotlight with the expectation that he is going to play tonight. And Shams describing Tatum as, quote, ready to go. Now, props for this one for Tatum. At last look, only 12.5 points. We don't have any details, but you have to assume that he will be on a minutes restriction in that first game in, again, roughly 10 months. So 20, 25 minutes probably at most, something to consider. Sticking with basketball, last night, Victor Wembanyama, a future MVP in this league, albeit not this year. It's going to happen. 38 points. The Spurs handled the Pistons in what may have been an NBA Finals preview. 121-106. The Spurs won. They covered as narrow 2.5-point favorites. This is a game that we talked about liking the San Antonio side on the show just yesterday, about 24 hours ago. Wemby, again, monster performance, added 16 rebounds. De'Aaron Fox, almost 30 in the win as well. Cade Cunningham, who might be the MVP if SGA and Jokic don't meet the necessary games played 65 threshold, 26 points, 8 assists. As far as the Jazz go, they snapped a 7-game skid in Trae Young's debut for the Wizards. 122-112, the loss for the Wiz. Young, though, 19 minutes. Might be sort of a similar situation, obviously, to the Tatum news that we talked about in terms of minutes restrictions coming off of injuries, although Young, of course, had played at some point earlier this year. But 19 minutes, 12 points, couple rebounds, 6 assists. The Jazz won as 4.5-point dogs on the road in that one. Ace Bailey, the rookie, 32 points. Let's hear from Trae Young. Oh, never mind. We keep going here. LeBron James breaking the NBA's career field goal record in a loss to the Nuggets, 120-113. The Nuggets, with that victory, cover as 3.5-point home favorites. LeBron broke Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record for career field goals in the loss, 15,338 for LeBron now, finishing the game with 16 points, which is generally in the neighborhood of what he gives you night to night at this stage of his career, north of 40. Jokic, triple-double for, again, the maybe MVP. 28 points, 12 rebounds, 13 assists. Jamal Murray also factored in with 28 points. The T-Wolves topped the Raptors at home. Anthony Edwards, many wondered, would he play? He did. 22 points in that one. The Wolves won and covered. They were 4.5-point favorites in this game. 5 straight victories for Minnesota. The Pelicans, in something of a tank fest at night, did crush Sacramento. 133-123, a nice double-digit win there. The Pels covered as 6.5-point road favorites. Zion, Sadiq Bey, Trey Murphy, all at least 20 points in that victory. The Kings, worst in the NBA. Granted, they are decimated, that roster, by season-ending injuries, but still 14-50 right now. And Russell Westbrook, we don't have time to play it for you, but went off on the media after the game. Obviously, he is not really enjoying what is going on in Sacramento, and those among the talking heads who are weighing in on all of that. Today, as mentioned, the NHL trade deadline, moves being made throughout the day. Some of the bigger names to already change homes ahead of the 4 o'clock Eastern deadline this afternoon. The Ducks traded for veteran John Carlson from the Capitals, 36-year-old D-man who was traded early this morning, and the Caps receiving a conditional first-round draft pick in 2026 or 27, along with a 27 third-round pick. Again, he's getting up there in age, but the guy is still producing. Also, the Avalanche, who are the Stanley Cup favorite on the odds board, acquiring Nicholas Waugh for a conditional first-round pick. As much more on the way here on NewsWire. Go nowhere. We are halfway home here on NewsWire on SportsGrid. Thanks for hanging with us. I am Adam Kaufman, joined now by Sam McQuillan, our friend from Legal Sports Report, a regular here on the program. Sam, good to see you.
Good to be with you, Adam.
So let's get into some of the news. I know, the two of us would love to just keep talking about the Knicks-Nuggets game tonight as we were backstage, but you wrote about 2 U.S. senators have introduced the End Prediction Markets Corruption Act. That happened just yesterday, which would bar top government officials from buying or selling contracts tied to the outcome of real-world events. We know, obviously, the prediction markets and real-world events with what happened in Iran. It's been a whole fiasco in terms of Kalshi and people chasing money, again, surrounding the, death of an individual, let alone, this isn't us wagering on the trading on the side of who wins a game or who wins an Oscar or something like that. Again, real world events. So what do you make of this act and what's to come?
Yeah, legislation is kind of just a product of where we are with prediction markets right now. I mean, it's a good question. It's, prediction markets really started to take off about a year ago. They've been around for a long time, to be clear. They were very popular with the election and everything, but when they really started to take off was when Trump got into office. All of a sudden, Kalshi started offering sports bets, and that is now about like 85, 87% of their business. So to be clear, most of the activity that happens on these prediction markets is why you have all these lawsuits. You're talking about people being really concerned, senators mainly, about insider information being traded. You mentioned a couple of cases. There's about $500 million placed just before the Iran strikes over the past weekend on those strikes happening, which I've raised questions. Is there insider trading information being leaked? Anytime you're betting on the outcome of something to happen, when it's a government, decision specifically, there's a concern about, did someone in the White House talk to somebody? Did somebody's brother place something on it? When you talk about the state regulations that we have with sports books, it's easier to monitor that stuff. They have a lot of robust regulations in place. The issue with prediction markets right now seems to be the CFTC is the one that's supposed to regulate this, but there's really nobody working at the CFTC. It's very understaffed. They really have not flagged any of these cases. So what you have happen are these instances where you have these sketchy bets being placed. You mentioned that the Kalshi had to refund bets placed on the supreme leader in Iran to be out by a certain date, clarifying that that's not a war market or an assassination market, which is technically prohibited under the law, but it's just the Wild West right now with the regulation, with all these kind of things. And I think senators are starting to use it as a political standpoint of, we can maybe score some points by saying everyone's banned from doing this. And we'll see what happens with this bill. I'd liken it to the criticism that happens a lot about senators betting on the stock market, which we know they've not been able to pass that, in part because the people that's affecting, they're the ones making those decisions. I don't think they want to do that. So I wonder what kind of opposition we'll see here, given the fact that it's only really Democrats proposing this right now. The G and the Trump administration has been really embracing prediction markets and them as sources to find information faster than the news. Like, to these points, when you have insider information, we know kind of the news before it happens, but there's the sketchy part of that is, why are people making millions of dollars off of the death of someone? So I think lawmakers want to use this as an opportunity to kind of score some political points, rein everything in. But we'll certainly see how it develops. You often have issues in politics that start one way and then they get completely thrown another way. The prediction markets things has been, and that's not even with the sports factor in. So it's definitely a really interesting story right now to keep watching how Washington's appetite for this stuff kind of develops, and just where their attention is right now with this stuff, because it's pretty crazy.
Well, the Wild West, as you said, but I'm also just curious, not that you've got the crystal ball to be able to tell us, but I'm wondering what the future of all of this is inside the next year or two. It's being looked at, being handled very differently than, say, gambling legalization, which, as we know, continues to spread from state to state to the point where eventually we'll get, we're basically roughly 80% of the way there as it is right now. But with prediction markets, you're seeing companies jump quickly to react to the popularity of this. Sportsbooks creating super apps, Underdog this week laying off a quarter of the company. So it can basically change a lot of the content direction into that of prediction markets. Where are we heading here?
Yeah, I really wish I could pull out my crystal ball and predict accurately the future and put money on it and see if I could win. But I think the answer of where we're heading is more uncertainty, and in the short term, more companies, like you mentioned, trying to capitalize on that. When prediction markets first kind of took off this past year, there was a little bit of a hesitancy from sports books. You mentioned DraftKings and their super app they're doing now. FanDuel's doing prediction markets. There was a little bit of a hesitancy to jump in, saying, we don't know if this is exactly legal. We don't know what will happen with this stuff. But as the Trump administration has really embraced this, they were the ones who lifted a ban on Polymarket re-entering the US. That's why Polymarket is back. Donald Trump Jr. is a board advisor to Kalshi. and Polymarket, Trump's Truth Social platform, is partnered with Polymarket. It's going to launch its own prediction market. So I think what we've seen is, as the White House and the executive branch has really said, no, this stuff is here to stay. The sports betting companies, the likes of Underdog, they've said, this is actually going to save us a ton of money if we do this. We won't have to pay any state taxes on it. Underdog, they got rid of, I think, like 300 people, a lot of their workforce. We can just really go into a much easier business. That's kind of what always the secret of gambling has been, is how do we do it for a really, cost-effective way? If we don't call it sports betting, if we call it prediction markets, we don't have to pay gambling taxes, and we don't have to hire as many employees. So I think as long as the current administration is embracing this and supporting this, we'll see what the lawsuits, how they play out with the Supreme Court eventually. But as long as the executive branch is really embracing this, I think you're just going to see more people jump in and try to take advantage. But then in 3 years from now, we could have a totally different administration and the laws could be rewritten and completely changed. So you just never really know. I think the only sure thing is that in the short term, companies will try to make a lot of money out of it.
Sam, you noted at the end of last month that Missouri sports betting handle fell about 30% in its second month, the revenue dropping about 50%. Online sports books issuing nearly $600 million in promo credits during the month of December, deductions that obviously, as you said, once again, gutted taxable revenues. And so some states are always going to do better than others, depends on the appetite, obviously, for gambling. And I'm sure the teams at whatever the sport that are part of those states, how rabid the fan bases are, these all come into play as well. But what do you make of the early struggles, failures, even during the state of Missouri as it relates to sports betting handle?
Yeah, it's actually been there's actually been a lot of good success for the sports betting companies in terms of how much people are betting in the state. It's just the tax system, which is kind of messed up right now. Missouri launched in December, but they've only made, like you mentioned, about $660,000 in taxes, and that's because the state allows these operators to deduct all the promos they're putting out from their taxable revenue. So you have a situation where a company like FanDuel, for example, took $200 million in handle, paid out $166 million in winnings, but they also issued about $55 million in promotions, which means they got to write that all off of their taxable handle. And FanDuel hasn't paid any taxes in Missouri for the first 2 months. So when you're talking about the biggest sports betting company there is not paying taxes, the lawmakers are going to come back to the drawing board and say, okay, we need to get rid of these promo deductions, as we've seen a number of other states do as well. If this new law passes, which is being proposed in Missouri, they would have made about 57 times more in taxes than they've made already in the first 2 months. That's quite a difference. And I'm kind of surprised that they didn't have this to begin with. We kind of saw this early on with sports betting, states realizing, oh, they're deducting a ton of promos. We're making no tax revenue that we projected. Let's go out and figure out a way to change it. I think Missouri, late to the game with sports betting, obviously, is late to the game as well with this tax change, but we'll have to see if it passes.
All right, Sam, real fast, your Knicks can get this done in Denver tonight?
I think so. I would take the Knicks.
There you go. See, he's not just giving you the legal news relates to sports betting and prediction markets. Sam McQuillan, Legal Sports Report. Thank you, sir. Talk again soon.